Hello and welcome to Talking Bottom. I'm Paul Tanter.
I'm Matt Brooks.
And I'm Angela Pearson.
And we're hugely honoured to be joined today by a very special guest. In the world of theatre, he's directed productions including The Grapes of Wrath, The Hunt for Red Willie, and The Lovers at Versailles. He's appeared on stage in The Phlebotomist, Sweeney Todd, The Importance of Being Earnest, Feston, Sam Mendes' productions of The Ferryman, and was nominated for an Olivier Award for his performance in Juno and the Paycock. He's appeared in films including Jude, Borstal Boy, Breakfast on Pluto, Veronica Guerin, Savage, and The Journey. His television work includes Agatha Christie and The Curse of Ishtar, The Tudors, 13 Steps Down, Inspector George Gently, The Young Ones, a phenomenal turn in Cracker, and, fortunately for Bottom fans everywhere, the role that is frequently cited as people's favourite guest appearance in the episode that is also often regarded as the fans' favourite. He's the man who Richie and Eddie tried to kill and eat when all he wanted to do was knock off early. To us, he is and will always be the gas man. Mark Lambert, thank you for being here. It's an absolute honour to have you Talking Bottom with us.
Good. Well, likewise, it's a pleasure. And it's nice to revisit such a fun episode of this, I have to say. It's great.
Do you want a cup of tea? It's the best tea in London. But we'd like to kick off with how you got started as an actor, Mark. What was it about acting that appealed and how did you find your way into the industry?
Well, funny enough, I was the son of a vet here in Ireland. And I was fully intending to be a vet, but I was really, really stupid at maths. Therefore, I was no good at chemistry. Therefore, I was no good at physics. Very good at biology. And I also took part in plays from a very young age. And like a lot of actors, got a simple pleasure out of pretending to be somebody else and making people laugh. And I think somebody once, when I went to the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, I was asked what made me want to become an actor or what did I like about acting? And I said, well, truthfully, showing off. Which is kind of strange. They were expecting something a little bit more intelligent than that. But actually, it's just fun. And obviously, that's what you get with people like Rik and Aid, was that ability to just have fun and show off and have fun. But I mean, as well as obviously in my career, I had played a lot of fun roles. I've also played a lot of serious roles, but there's a pleasure in that as well.
Your appearance as the bank manager in The Young Ones, like for you, was that your first step into alternative comedy, or had you done anything like that?
Yes, in a way. I had done a lot of comedy review. When I was at Manchester University, I was a year above Rik and Aid, and we had a review company called Daft Turnip, and Rik and Aid actually was hugely in awe of our company. We were just pre all that stuff up, and you'd have gone to Edinburgh and made a splash and be picked up by a TV station. We were just all way too pure for that, which was a shame. But we did a lot of experimental comedy review. For example, we had done a review called Le Navet Braque, which is Daft Turnip in French. So we did a French theme, and we all wore tights and striped T-shirts and berets and everything. We took it around universities and everything, and colleges as an experimental theatre company, which of course it wasn't. It was a setup. So about 10 minutes into the show, people realized they'd been had, and it was just crack. And I mean, the idea of, I was the fittest looking person in a pair of tights. I mean, actors in tights, it was funny. And indeed, many years later, Rik asked me, not many years later, a few years later, at the Edinburgh Festival, and I was up there with a comedy review from Bristol at the festival. I was studying to be a serious actor at the time. He asked me to go on the Fringe Festival stage with him to do a sketch that we had done in one of our comedy reviews, which entailed wearing tights and doing a tambourine and doing experimental dance to symbolism and things like that, which Rik just managed to make hilariously funny.
Is it possible that Daft Turnip was an inspiration for Rik's 20th Century Coyote then?
Rik or Aid would have to be the ones that would answer that, God rest him. But I think I do remember Rik saying to me, as you do when you're at university, you get influences. I mean, I'm sure Monty Python and all the previous sketch writers had influence on him. It wasn't just us, but we were, as happens, a year ahead, and we were doing stuff that was a bit mad and a bit crazy. And he took it, of course, one step further with 20th Century Coyote and Death on a Toilet and stuff like that. But he definitely paid homage to us, and he was always very respectful. So much so that at one stage he asked me if I'd wanted to join him and Aid when they were doing the stuff in Raymond Review Bar. And at the time, I just thought had just left the Bristol Old Vic theatre school. I'd got a job with same year as Dante Lewis. We got first jobs. I don't know what happened to him, but we had our first jobs together in the Bristol Old Vic, and I'd gone on somewhere else, done, I wouldn't call it serious drama, but Rik and Aid were really slumming it around the university circuit and living, which was part of where they got their inspiration from. But they were doing. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Could say I regret it, but I also had a different career, and I enjoyed the career I had. And I always thought Rik was both a lovely guy and Aid and very funny. But I just went on a different path. But when Young Ones came up, to go back to your question, rather interesting occurrence, which is classic of comedians. Rik said to me one day, "You've got to do one of the Young Ones." And I said, "I'd love to, actually." And he said, "Well, come up with an idea." So I came up with an idea. This is pre-Father Ted, of the priest who ended up headbutting Vivian and being more wild than Vivian. And he thought that was a great idea. And about, 6 months, a year later, Paul Bradley, who also appears in quite a few Young Ones and Bottom as well, 2 series of Bottom, said to me, "Oh, that was a great idea of yours." And I said, "What idea?" He said, "About the priest." And I said, "What about it?" He said, "Oh, sorry, do you not know?" And I said, "No." He said, "Oh, Terry Jones is playing this priest who headbutts Vivian." I went, "Jesus, bastard." And however, I think we never talked about it, because that's, it's like comedians nicking jokes. That's fine. And I couldn't argue with Terry Jones. He's such he was fantastic Monty Python legend. However, I think in recompense, Rik gave me that bank manager in the last episode of The Young Ones as a sort of crackerjack pencil, really. So, and I accepted it gratefully.
Was that your first foray into sitcoms?
Yes, I think it was. We'd done the very first TV thing I did was down in Bristol. We filmed reviews for Bristol West or something like that, but it was a shocker. We'd done a really successful review in the Edinburgh Festival and packed out. But then what happened was that they filmed it with no audience, with no set. It was the cheapest of the cheap. And I always remember being asked to get a crowd together, come down to watch it, to get canned laughter in it. And just like it was just awful. So in terms of sitcom, yes. And I've done a bit over here in Ireland. I did a sitcom called Fergus's Wedding with Michael McElhatton, who is in Game of Thrones and various things. And it was amusingly so that I, like lots of actors, say, "Oh yeah, I'd love to do that," not really reading the scripts. And it was about swingers, right? And it was about, and my very first scene was in a pinstripe suit in a sex shop. And I thought, playing a barrister, I thought, this is great, this is fine. From then on, I was in a leather jockstrap and shoes and socks in a house surrounded by women in brown panties and even nude people. And I just went, I had to pick my kids up the next day after all these episodes came out. It was one of those things I thought, next time read the script.
everyone looking at you, wondering where they recognize you from. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, at the time I had done a film called Evelyn with Pierce Brosnan. I played the Minister of Education. It was all about orphans in the 50s and all that. And I had done that and another series, a more serious thing called No Tears, or we call it No Laughs, about hepatitis C scandal over here. And it gone out at the same time. And I picked my kids up at school and said, "Oh, we saw you on TV last night." And I go, "Yeah, oh no, of course it was that. Wasn't the other two things. It was that." So the image seared into the mind of me in a leather jockstrap and shoes and socks.
And so,
is it still available?
No.
Damn.
No, I said to somebody once, I was talking to an actor over here who does a thing called Rotha Carol Kelly, which is very funny. But he said, I was telling him about this, and I said, the great thing is, I said, it never got repeated because, it didn't quite work and all this. And within about 5 seconds, he was showing it to me on his mobile phone, of course, because you can't escape your past, basically.
After the role in The Young Ones, that may have been a sort of consolation prize, you then, several years later, had what many consider to be the defining guest role in Bottom. How did you come to get that role?
It was a straight offer, and indeed I was asked to do the second series as well, and I couldn't do it. It was too much to my regret. I don't know what part, But it was a bit like me. This happens to actors. I got offered what I wanted to. I like collecting these things, and I was offered a very early episode of Father Ted, and I turned it down because I thought I can do better than this. I want a better part, and I suspected, rightly, as with Bottom, that this would go to a second, more series, and I turned down Father Ted only to be offered a fantastic part the following year as the priest who's a cat burglar in the Christmas special, and accepted the part, all done and dealed. And then they said, oh, we're filming. And I was doing a show in Tricycle Theatre in London. And 2 days I couldn't make film in Ireland, and the whole thing fell apart. And it's one of those sad things. Anyway, with Bottom, I was able, it was a straight offer, didn't have to audition or anything like that. And it was just huge fun. And I can certainly talk to you about the few days of filming about it.
Yes. What were your initial thoughts when you got the script and you were reading it and seeing what was in fate for the poor gas man, all the things that would be happening to him? What were your thoughts when you got that?
Well, I instantly, I always thought Rik and Abe were funny anyway, and I knew that thing. The script was, when you read a script, sometimes at bottom you kind of go, this is so basic, it's so straightforward. And you think, because I'd done a comedy review, I knew the characters were fantastic. I knew my character was a victim, and in a way, you could argue a straight man to their comedy, and well, not in a way, and very much so. And I quite like doing that. I think it's underestimated, sometimes being the straight man, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't know where he came. It wasn't that I set him, made him from up north, but it was only. Like I was at the time when I was doing Cracker and Frost and Diel and Pasco and all those things. I thought, he's English, he's not Irish. So I played him as that. And the rest is there was a lot of work on the floor. And that's what Rik and Aid used to do. So they had the basic script, but there was an immense amount of improvising off it. And obviously, the case in point being the frying pan, the killing.
So was there much change between the script and when you guys actually went into rehearsals, and then did a lot of what ended up on screen grow out of the rehearsal process?
I would say it was pretty, at this stage, Rik and Aid had got much more disciplined about the script. So to be fair, a lot of it was the script, but Rik in particular would spin off some of the lines when he was sitting down, when he was talking to me and telling me how much he loved me as the way I love you. Though I think that was thrown in, he would add certainly, but it was, to be fair to them, it wasn't wildly different from the script, but then physically there were things added. And of course, Rik and they both added their physicality to it, which you don't read in the script. And then obviously, case in point of the frying pan business, that was completely improvised.
Well, we heard a story via Ed By that there was actually a bit of rivalry between Rik and the sound man during that scene.
That's right.
Well, how was that for you? Obviously, lying on the floor, how many takes was that?
The funny thing is, with actors, if you hear people laughing, you don't care. Pain. It's like you get rid of pain. I mean, I did that play that I did in the West End that at Juno in the Paycock, which I got an Olivier nomination for. There's an example of that where I was outside a window and I decided, because it was raining and he's stuck out there and the roof is slanted, I thought it'd be very funny if I leapt up in the air and like he'd slipped. And so you see him jumping up in the air and collapsing. And I did that every night for God knows how many months, wrecking my elbow. But you'd be surprised at what happens. And even with padding, it was still wrecking my elbow, which I'm years later still suffering from. But if you get a laugh, you just go through the pain barrier. Mm-hmm. In this case, with the frying pan, obviously, it wasn't, it wasn't one of these. So, but it was made of rubber. But I think he was only supposed to hit me about 3 times. Mm-hmm. And then he started doing it. And I thought, what's he doing this for? And I said, and I couldn't, and he kept doing it. And the more he did it, the more the audience laughed. And yes, and after it, he told me he was just trying to catch the Sandman out. So everybody went, he was good. And he kept doing it in different rhythms, as you'll see. And the Sandman was pretty good, actually, to be fair. Don't know what the result was, but he just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. I mean, that was part of Rik anyway, is that he pushed things beyond what you'd think was acceptable, and it just was funnier.
Yeah, and so during the rehearsals, then it was a much shorter scene, and then on the night it was longer.
Extended. I mean, what on the night of what I do remember about recording was Rik going out to, and I think Abe did as well, but they went out to do the warm up, and I thought, oh my God, it's incredible, because I'd seen Rik obviously doing his stand up in the Edinburgh Festival and places like that, where he was playing Richie Rich or whatever he was, Ricky Rich, and basically standing there bragging about how wealthy he was and how sexy he was. And but he, which I suppose was a forerunner of what's his name, Bastard, and but he in this case he goes out and he warms up the audience, so they're already fired up. So once you're on, and whether it's the bang of the thing, but also, for example, when we were rehearsing just before, and I think there's a bit with a fork, I said to him, he said, well, I don't know. I said, why don't you stick in my balls? And he said, he said, yeah, brilliant idea. Now, obviously knew he was going to, we'd have to get special effects in to protect my, I have had 3 children since, and they got a bit of polystyrene and stuffed it down my kecks and stuck the fork in.
That's the level of special effects. Is we'll get some polystyrene and we'll stuff it down your trousers. I mean, it works so well, doesn't it?
Listen, they thought on their feet in the way that was what they've been doing for years anyway with the shows they've taken on the road and all that. So it was part of that. And also I like to work that way anyway. So you come up with physical ideas, but I didn't, beyond that, I can't remember how much I added, but the stuff with the tea and everything that was there in the script, and a cup of cold tea and all that, which was pretty disgusting.
Yeah, that looks like you're selling it, but I imagine it was just really grim.
It was just, I think it was water, whatever it was, but it was horrible. No, I listened, you just react, and doing it live was fantastic. I mean, hearing the audience laugh, and there were a few mistakes and errors that occurred, and he just pick it up. And Rik was he usually made it fun when he made a mistake, so the audience didn't mind. But they were pretty, it was a professional outfit, so they wanted to get everything right. And
when you're looking at a script like that, and it's including things like there is an explosion of gas, where there's literally a gas explosion and that kind of thing. Do you look at that and think, how the hell are they going to do that in a sitcom studio?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that they did were fantastic. Well, of course, they had plenty of practice with the young ones, and they the set was wrecked most days. Everything was wrecked. And in a way, I mean, they weren't obviously the first people to do that in terms of comedy, but there was that time. I mean, the young ones was such a huge kind of breakthrough at the time from the sort of sitcoms that had been around, the traditional type of sitcoms. And it was, they brought, elements of, the Three Stooges or all those old fashioned things to their comedy, stuff that they'd been influenced by, I suspect, to that. And the physicality and the was all important. And then the special effects of the BBC brought, which has always been brilliant that way. I mean, the BBC, that's why, as an Irishman, I say, please don't run the BBC down. Please don't do it, over the years, sort of the jewels in the crown, your jewels in the crown of the NHS and the BBC. And you kind of go, because the expertise, I've done a lot of radio, and I've directed radio as well as being in them. And the special effects boys, there's a real pride taken in what they do. That was obviously very evident in both the Owens and in Bottom. So I mean, to a large extent, it was like a score. It was scored and scripted, and they would improvise off it, and I would give it a chance. But there wasn't much that wasn't in the script.
Yeah.
Did you find it hard not to corpse when Rik was obviously doing a bit of improv?
Well, just even when I opened the door, when he opens the door, and I'm standing there going, "Can I have a?"
Yeah,
it was really hard. I mean, it was great fun, and they were corpses as well. I mean, they weren't exactly straight as well, but they enjoyed, I think, making their guests corpse as well, giving their guests a hard time in a nice way, in a good way.
That's Absolutely, and it's genius. The accent that you did bring to the role is genius.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. It's rather pathetic, really. You know.
I'm surprised that you're Irish instead of Northern.
Are people often surprised that you're Irish and not Northern? I think he's...
I think so, because I spent a lot of time, obviously, it was at Manchester University. I then went to Bristol, Old Vic Theatre School, and then was that. So I spent a lot of time there. I'm also what they call a proddy Irishman, so I sort of had a middle class accent anyway, so it wasn't really strong Irish. I have played really strong Irish parts, obviously, but I didn't, and a lot of the time, you know, as an Irish actor in England, you can't survive just playing Irish parts all the time. You've got to adapt. So Cracker, DL and Pasco, the first episode of that, and my episode in Frost, etc. Sharp's Rifles, I'm all playing English in that. And I enjoyed doing that. But the story I was going to tell was that I live in a place called Greystones, just south of Dublin here. I moved back. I used to live in London. Around that time, I was living in London, obviously, for a long time. But it's down by the coast. It's just south of Dublin, very nice place. And as I was walking down the road about a year ago, this electricity van, right, with ESB pulled up beside me. And he wound the window down. He went, "Gas man." I said, "Gas man." And I went, "Electricity man." And he went, "What?" I said, "Electricity man." Because actually, initially, I didn't know what he was talking about, because nobody had mentioned, but it was surprising that a lot of Irish people had seen Bottom. And this was stunning. He'd obviously just seen me walking along. He went, "Gas man," and he was in an electricity van.
How long ago was that, Mark?
That was about a year and a half ago.
Okay, because we wanted to ask if bands do still yell "Gas man" at you. And
not many, but it's surprising. I cannot tell you that, you know, I might have walked off a stage playing King Lear. I might have played, got my Olivier nominations. But boy, the amount of times people have gone, "Were you the gas man?" The bald head, of course, still stays the same, you know.
Well, I was going to say, Mark, actually, it's probably because bald men don't tend to age. And
right.
I'm not trying to blow smoke up your bum here, but you don't look much older than you did when you were the gas man.
Well,
so you
you
aged very well.
Me, it's my birthday yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday belatedly.
I was 25. No, but no, it does help in a way. You kind of don't change that much. It's obviously got grayer hair and everything, but I look back on some of those things and with great amusement. And actually, funny, you were talking about some of the films I was in. I don't know how it came about. I was in a film called Prayer for the Dying with Mickey Rourke, and I looked and I thought, oh my God, I had to call one of my 21-year-old in and said, "Look, I've got hair. I've got a bit of hair."
Nice to have that sort of visual record of it, isn't it?
Yeah. Listen, I have to say, Bottom was, and of course, for my children, Bottom was hugely popular. And even though they didn't live through that period, but they were post that. But the comedy does survive, and because it's physical and it's funny,
At some point they were growing up, did you sit them down to watch, or did they discover your episode of Bottom at some point?
It's a good question. I think I played I think I played it to them the first time. It was a bit like the two things they enjoyed was that Bottom, and I also played this character in Sharp's Rifles, called Sharp's Regiment, where I end up, I've got this wax black moustache, and he's a total coward, and he's a ghastly character, and he's terrible, and he goes up, and instead of, he's such a coward, he's got all his soldiers out, instead of whacking with his stick, I improvise. I asked for special effects, and I said, can you give this soldier shin pad? Because I think it'd be a cowardly thing to do, is to go up to hit him and then give him a little pathetic little kick on the shin and run away. So they used to like that as a sort of bit of similar kind of physical comedy.
I was going to ask, how old were they when they saw the episode of Bottom? Because if they were too young, they might have been terrified watching it, wondering what was happening to Daddy.
What's happened to Daddy? Yeah,
it's true actually. Yeah, I don't think they. I think there was when I got the fork in the Ghoulies. I think my youngest son was a bit concerned about that, because he thought he kind of didn't understand how they did it. The other two obviously realized. I talked to them about special effects and stunt stunt work and all that.
Yeah, not about you going bus surfing as a hobby.
Doing what?
They didn't think you went bus surfing as a hobby.
No, yeah.
So,
of course, the bus. Yeah, of course, that. Yeah.
Gas, your episode is joint highest rated of all bottom episodes.
Really?
Along with the Christmas episode.
Wow.
Those two are generally seen by fans as their favourite episodes.
Wow.
Here we are 30 years later talking about it. Do you remember what the response at the time was? Was it what the sort of critical reaction was?
Not specifically to my episode, because in those days, I mean, most of the, I had friends phoning me up and saying it was great fun and all that, but we didn't have the internet in the same way to get immediate feedback. But secondly, reviewers would tended to review the entire opus, or they'd review the first episode of Bottom. That was the norm. They didn't usually go, up to a particular time. So I'm not averse to, tearing up pieces of paper and sticking them in an album, I don't know who for, but for reviews. But there wasn't, if I recall, that many. But what I did realize, the repeats, and then obviously certain times that some of those episodes, that particular episode seems to have been repeated a lot. And I get those, as you do with the BBC, little repeat fees for these things, from the ridiculous to, in the past, some very nice things, from Australia and all over the world, of course. Bottom was produced.
It's the gift that keeps on giving in more ways than one. Then. Yeah,
well, the young ones was extraordinary. I mean, God knows what they were still getting, aid and co, because they was repeated so often. I just hope that a younger generation gets to enjoy it as well, because actually there's not a lot on TV that covers that area and that age range, because the age range was quite big. People underestimated how, they thought, oh, well, maybe it's for, anything from 15 to 25. They said, no, it went way beyond that.
Absolutely.
Much younger kids and much older people.
Yeah, we were all young watching it. I think I was 8 when I first watched Bottom, which is obviously not approved by parents, but my older brother got me into it, and there is nothing that's been like it since.
There hasn't actually, very, very little since, and it's funny. If I did a series which was more for children called Roy. And it was BBC Two, and it was sort of, the central character was a cartoon, and everybody else was human. So he's brought up by a family, and his sister and parents, and I was the headmaster called Hammond. And I think we did 52 episodes. You certainly can Google that. And it had a lot of physical farce, which I absolutely adored. So the cartoon character who goes to school and he lives at home is aware he's a cartoon, can do things as a cartoon, but he's also treated like one of the school children, or he's in the class, but he keeps getting the better of. It's like Pink Panther getting the better of his detective. So I was always the patsy. I was always forever, ending up with, his face down a vacuum cleaner or whatever. I was my face down a toilet at one point. So there was a lot of that, but I absolutely adored all that. And that wasn't that long ago. I think that was only about 8 years ago. And it was hugely popular for a while, and also sold all over the country. But it was really, what was sad was that it wasn't shown to adults in the sense that it was advertised as children's TV, but a lot of it was very much adult stuff, particularly, it was like a sort of office, particularly as my headmaster. He was desperately ambitious and pathetic and paranoid, and it was good fun. Anyway, that was kind of the last. Actually, it wasn't the last comedy series. I did a thing called Women on the Verge, which Sharon Horgan produced about 2 years ago. Didn't quite work, if I'm honest, but it was fun doing it.
Do you feel that Bottom has, it's got an enduring affection because of the generation span that it appealed to at the time?
I think so, yeah. I think it's two things. I mean, I think Rik obviously and Aid had huge affection. He had a huge following, and I think as people got older, there was a nostalgic feel about it. It was like the perpetual student in a way, which we all have. I mean, I was there last night in a restaurant for the first time in about a year and a half, with a group of friends, some very well-known actors, and that you would know. And we suddenly realized we were just as childish as we were. I mean, it's one of the joys of, I suppose, being an actor is that you're almost obliged to be childish and maintain that kind of perpetual student feel in order to be free to create, And I hope that I never grow up, and certainly Rik and Aid never grew up. Although you see Aid in quite a few serious dramas these days, but
you're doing a lot of interesting dramas like War and Peace and
that's right.
Like that. The characters of Richie and Eddie were sort of the evolved versions of characters that we'd seen Rik and Aid do on stage as the Dangerous Brothers, and then in the Young Ones, and then in Filthy Rich and Cat Flap. You got to be there with them as they were inhabiting Richie and Eddie. The characters, what do you? How do the characters strike you? It's often said they're sort of perverted, grotesque, but they're living in a sort of traditionally British sitcom.
Well, that was what was clever about it. I mean, they set it up in, as you say, in what was in one room, really. I mean, a lot of it was often in one room in that thing. I thought that they had a sort of ability to tap into. They both were physical and they had funny lines, but they also pushed the kind of madness. It's a thing that you don't associate necessarily with British comedy. I mean, Irish people are quite, certain Irish artists always consider themselves, and in fact, probably Till Father Ted was the first really, you might call, mad Irish sitcom. And we don't have that tradition that the English have. And but that generally, and of course, we didn't make it. Channel 4 made it, I think, in the end, didn't they? But nevertheless, it was that group of people were and who knows, that I think those boys might well pay homage to Rik and Aid, actually, because a lot of the physicality in Father Ted was, not dissimilar to some of the stuff that was there. Again, set in a kind of, you could argue, a traditional British sitcom situation. But I think as all these things, whether even the traditional British sitcoms are remembered, whether it's Steptoe or not so much Dad's Army, but what's his name, the Death is Due Part, those things that are all character based. The characters were strong. Yeah. And first and foremost, those people knew who they were and the relationships between them, and from that comes the comedy. Yeah. If you distill some of the episodes of Bottom in any kind of, I always amused by the sort of idea of, say, can you pitch the episode of Bottom Gas to a filmmaker or to TV and say, look, this is what we're thinking. You just say, no, you're joking me. It's mad. But the reality go on.
Carry on. Well, can you, on the subject of character, give us your opinion on what the gas man was about a little bit more? We don't even know his name.
No, you don't, actually. It's a good question. You don't know his name. I think
he's not married either. No? That's the only thing. He worked for the gas board and he's not married. That's all we know.
That's, well, in a funny kind of a way, you're right. He didn't. He was what he was supposedly very good at his job. So he was good at his job. He was complete innocent in the sense that he trusted everybody. Sorry, he would trust people when he'd go around and think, but he didn't trust these two boys, obviously. And he had a certain amount of, he was just going about his job. He was Mr. Jobsworth. So he was intent on making sure everybody was, paying up and doing the right thing. He was asking the right questions and catching them out, obviously, all too easily. But I don't think he was, in these things, you don't go into too much depth. There's no sort of, I don't think you find Dan Day-Lewis playing this part. Doing method gas man, I just spent 4 months being a gas man.
Are you saying you didn't spend weeks filling out the diary of what the character was thinking?
I hate to say.
You don't know what he was going to spend his emergency fiver on.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Your episode also featured an appearance from someone who was also a very popular character in Bottom, who only appeared in that episode, and that was the late Brian Glover, who was their neighbour, Mr. Rottweiler. Do you recall your scenes with him and what he was like to work with?
He was actually lovely because, funny enough, like you see these people playing. He played a lot of hard role parts. You know, he was a tough man and all that. But of course, like a lot of these, people who, Colin Bell, all these people who play baddies, they're all lovely, soft people, most of them. There's very few really unpleasant people. But he was, I don't think he had done a huge amount of, I may be wrong, but I don't think he'd done a huge amount of comedy. And what I loved about Rik and Aid was that they were able to get people like him in particular. I mean, I came from, obviously I knew them, and I'd been at college there and all that kind of thing. So it was a different route. But someone like Brian Glover was established and played a lot of serious roles as well. And suddenly there he is, lying in bed with the thing. He did bring always that kind of mad intensity, which and slight madness, which obviously they spotted and they went for him. But at that stage, a lot of people were saying, there were people queuing up to be in Bottom, They had no problem getting anybody they wanted. Cliff Richard apart, maybe. So.
Do you have any memories from your time as a student with Rik and Aid then that you can share?
Yeah, I do. We used to have on Monday nights, we had a thing called the Stephen Joseph Studio. We were all doing a course in drama, BA honours degree, which was academic. It wasn't, if they thought you wanted to become an actor, you wouldn't have got in. So at the time I was going, I probably do, but I'm not sure. But when I got my interview, I said absolutely not. And indeed, out of my year, I think there was only about 2 of us that became actors. But in Rik's year, you had, obviously Paul Bradley, and there was a few of them, and Rik and Aid, etc. Every Monday night there was a free performance. I think you could get a £5 for the budget, and that was the budget. And there was you put on a performance on a Monday night in this thing, and there was a mixture of terrible, terrible experimental drama to wholly pretentious, to plays that were written by students, to plays that were, established plays, to comedy. And my first was obviously my comedy review group, which lasted for at least over 2 years. We did about 5 or 6 shows. Rik started doing his stuff with 20th Century Culture, but I remember going along with Rik to a poetry reading, because we were bastards really, and we went to a poetry reading at the university, and I didn't have the balls, but Rik did, and he stood up and I always remember one of his poems, which I still remember. He went, and people were generally getting up reading poems. It was very mean of us, really. But he stood up and he went, this is a poem called Moved. And he went, once I went to the cinema. I was moved twice by the manager. Thank you. Sat down. And like that. Once I was moved twice by the manager. And then he did one where he went, theatre, Peter Hall, theatre, Lauren Bacall. And he kept going on with like this. And at the end of each poem, he'd say, thank you. And he sat down. And it took ages for people to realize he was taking the piss out of that, particularly the thank
That's
you.
fantastic.
He had all these books. So he was naughty. That's what it was. It wasn't nasty. It was just naughty. Mm-hmm. And I also remember another little memory was him I can't remember in what context it was, but he did an extraordinary, I really wish I could have recorded it. He came on dressed with a judge's wig and a cloak. And he had a song, because he actually was quite a good singer, and not a bad dancer. He went, and all I remember was the song Sunday, I'm the judge and I know about laws. I've had my male menopause. I'm one of the country's leading boss. Oh, yes, And you do that kind of Rik Mayall kind of, yes, being the judge is jolly groovy. It's top ho, it's whiz, especially with my cap and gown on. It's just like showbiz. Yes. Sometimes I dress up as Nursey. Sometimes I just play with Percy. And it was all like this. It was absolutely hilarious. By this stage, the cloak was off and he had fishnet stockings and high heels. And I don't know why he never did it again, because it was fantastic. And the fact that it's remained in my head, because I tend to, it's a bit like one of those children's things. Once I've done a play or I've done these things, I forget. It's almost like making room for the next thing you've got to learn. Because if you remembered everything you've done, your brain would explode. So I don't remember, but I always remember that, most of that song. In fact, I always wanted to ask Aid if he ever remembered it or recorded it, but it was genuinely funny.
It sounds like you could have been there for the inception of Rik the Poet, possibly, the character he then went on to use in the Young Ones.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the sad thing was, in many respects, that I wasn't around a bit more. I mean, it was on my behalf. They were lovely to me and respectful, but I would have loved to have done much more with them. But at the time, 20th Century Courtesy I just went through a little phase of going, oh, there's a little bit too much for me. And the idea of going around universities and all that, I just couldn't do it. And obviously, had I not, I always wonder, would I have been part of the whole Young Ones basic setup if I had done it? But I wasn't, but they were fantastic, and maybe I would never have been, who knows? But I certainly enjoyed my time with them, and I wish I'd done a bit more with them. And I also saw Rik towards the end, not towards the end, but when around the time he just had his accident, after about a year after.
Does it surprise you that people are still watching Bottom 30 years later, and the people are still asking you about it?
It doesn't, actually. I know it sounds strange, because I talked to my friends last night and I told them I was doing this, and they all said, oh yeah, Bottom was great. And they're all mixed, quite serious actors, some of them, and not, they've done the comedy, and Miranda Richardson was there, who's Queenie, and things.
We love
she
that.
Was like she liked them, and it was some of the girls, not her, but some of the girls found a little bit too masculine, maybe, some of the stuff that went on, but generally speaking, I don't think people are surprised, because it was good physical humor. It wasn't obviously reliant always on what gags or text, but then if you look at Larry Saunders and all these things, the scripts are very straightforward and simple. It's about character and what happens.
Do you think that's why 30 years on it still endures?
I do. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. And the only, and as we said earlier in the conversation, I kind of wish that younger people got a chance to see it, because it's kind of bold and bad and naughty and rude and crude, all those things that you shouldn't be, they're unnecessary in life.
Absolutely, the anarchy that
still
comes with
even
it
for us adults,
and that's what we often lament on the podcast, that obviously we're trying to keep it alive, talking about Bottom and everything. There are so many fans out there that still love rewatching, but it's wanting a new generation to discover it.
Well, I'm glad that. I mean, I think it's a good thing, and hopefully, the BBC will keep I'm not talking about my repeat fees, but I do think it's worth pursuing, because there's nothing. It's another matter if it's been replaced by something very similar, and it's not that one wants to keep referring to the past as being great, but there are, as we all know, there's certain TV shows that are worth treasuring and paying homage to, which is what I guess you're doing, which is
so much value in comedy that's gone before. I still love watching Steptoe and Son, and it upsets me when I hear people say, "Oh, that was before I was born."
I know.
Why would you not want to watch something that's fantastic?
I know that and of course Wilfred Bramble played father. He was Irish, actually.
He was, yeah.
Oh, Harold. I actually slightly channeled him in there's a sort of soap over here called Fair City, which is the equivalent of EastEnders for Irish time, and I was cast as this terrible, father, this one of these central characters who was really nasty and bad and all this. But I kept saying, make him into Steptoe. It's a fantastic opportunity that he is bad and nasty, but he's fun, in the end. You kind of go, because he's you can see him being bad. Anyway, they didn't. And I wasn't going to stay in that particular sitcom anyway. I was killed off quite rightly.
Well, you can save him for the next one that you get offered.
Exactly. Yeah. I know, with plenty of those to come. And with ages, might be able to play him at the right age this time.
While we've got you here, I have to ask you this. Not only did you appear in my absolute favourite sitcom, but you've also appeared in one of my very favourite dramas, which was when you appeared in Cracker, in what was probably its biggest storyline when the show was at its absolute peak, with your character ending up being forced at gunpoint by Lorcan Cranach's Jimmy Beck to confess.
Frozen,
and then join him in a spectacular suicide off the top of a tall building.
Yeah.
Now, a role like that must be an actor's dream.
Well, that was a fantastic role. If I'm honest with you, stepping into that series, that was the last Jimmy McGovern script what came after was good as well, but that was the last Jimmy McGovern script. And it was like I call it stepping into a Rolls Royce, in the sense that the actors knew their parts, the script was perfect, the direction, the money thrown at it was just wonderful. So if you didn't give a good performance, it was entirely your fault, And I, again, played, I think I was asked if I wanted to play Irish, and I said, no, he's definitely he's definitely Northern. There's no point in not doing it. But it was very exciting to be part of that series. Because it not only was a hugely popular, but it was also, I got so much, as you do sometimes when an actor appears in one of these series that's successful, there's a spin-off that occurs just by dint of being in it, so that people go, oh, you were in that, the next job. I then played a series of murderers, by the way. And I met somebody again in the village not so long ago. This woman said, she said, you were in Cracker, weren't you? And I said, yeah. And she said, oh, I love Cracker. And I said, my husband and I sometimes love taking computer to bed and watching episodes of Cracker. And I said, that's a bit weird, isn't it? and I said, yeah. I said, funny enough, after that, I said, I ended up getting cast as sort of murderers. And I said, I think they went through a pawn shop for people they thought was, maybe benign people that you didn't expect to be murderers. And she went, oh, I don't know about that. Because literally in, Frost, I was a murderer. DL and Pasco, I was a murderer, and all that. Anyway, the final scene in that, and funny enough, I was with Lorcan Cranach last night, as we speak. And he had to pull me off, as you know, off the top of a building. And it was very scary. It was very high. It was a big skyscraper in Manchester. And at one stage, I had a wire. We both had wires through our leg, down the trouser legs, and then round our waist. And there were 3 guys holding us. Now, we weren't obviously going to jump, but we were at the edge. And I'm not too bad with head for heights, but that was really scary. And then we did a 12-foot jump into cardboard boxes, right? So that the camera's opposite, he's attached to me, and we jump. And it took me and him about an hour to pluck up the courage to jump into only 12 feet onto boxes. And we did. Of course, once you've done it once, you want to do it again like a child. You say, oh, can we do that again? It's great. But they didn't. They said, no, it's perfect take and all that. The sad thing was that when it came to the stuntmen who were there, and I remember talking to the stuntmen and saying, is this bread and butter to you? And they said, no, we don't sleep the night before. This is really, and I didn't know that. And he said, no, he said, people forget that. He said, if you're not frightened, you end up killing yourself.
Yeah.
In other words, it's the mad loopers that end up getting really serious accidents. He said, stuntmen are very cautious, and he said, we are really nervous. So they took 3. They were jumping in I don't know how many feet. I mean, it was just no amount of money would have, if they'd $500,000, I wouldn't have jumped, nothing, into these big airbags. And they were obviously kitted out to look like us. And they jumped when we were there, they canceled the jump because there was a wind coming around the corner and the airbags were slightly lifting. They cancelled it something like twice. They were getting $2,000 for the jump. I mean, nothing would have made me do that for $2,000. But And then eventually, about a week later, they did it. And the guy, even though they've got those sort of harnesses around their chests, he broke 2 ribs doing the jump, the guy that played my part, but he also jumped slightly the wrong way, which meant they couldn't match up the shots that Lorca and I had done jumping. So it would have been even more scary, because you would have seen us coming towards you in the camera like that, seeing us jump, and then they would have cut to us as they did. What you saw was the falling men coming down the side. So it was quite shocking anyway, but it would have been even more shocking. It was a shame because he jumped in a different way, they couldn't match the shots. So, but listen, it was great, and I loved doing it. And many years later, I was in another Jimmy McGovern thing called Bloody Sunday, which he wrote, and he's a fantastic. I don't know whether you saw that his recent series with Sean Bean.
Inside, I think it was.
Yeah.
No, I've got that on recording.
Watch it. Yeah, watch it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Cracker was like the defining drama of the '90s growing up.
No, I've been very lucky in that respect, and I've had some nice gigs in my time, and Bottom being one of them, of course.
Yeah. You got obviously typecast as a murderer, but
not as a gas man.
Not as a gas man, but
no,
maybe that's
I've never
what
played a gas man since.
Maybe that's what the role in the second series was going to be for you, if you'd been able to do the second series of Bottom. You came back and got revenge.
They didn't actually. The funny thing was that was the great thing about Rik, is that you just play a different character. I mean, Paul Bradley, as far as I know, played different characters in it, and you just come back and play somebody totally different, and it didn't matter. I mean, I was. It was a bit like the Bill. I was in 5 years. I did 5 different characters in the Bill. From tramps that were found, to detectives, and drunk detectives and all that. So.
Yeah, you've played a huge variety of roles over the years. Would you describe yourself as a character actor?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is that early career, when I set up, I would go up. I was always working. I was lucky. I always worked. I mean, my time as a delivering food around London and stuff, like lots of actors, as an extra job. Oh, by the way, this is a good one. I was driving a van for a delicatessen delivery service, and I used to phone them up and say, listen, I've got a few weeks off. Is there a job? And said, yeah. So you do that. And there was one I phoned up and said, and there were 2 vans, 2 little vans that went round. And the other van driver was Hugh Grant, who'd just come from Oxford. He's saying, I'm going to do a bit of acting. And I go, oh, yeah, well, that's what I do. He's going, whatever happened to him? Anyway.
No, I think he's still driving that van, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, it's I've been very lucky, and I've had a great time, playing lots of different roles. And I direct as well, which, I enjoy doing as well. But obviously... And it's been sorry, in relation to your question, in terms of parts, what happened was early on, in my 20s, I started to lose my hair.
Right.
And it's quite extraordinary how it did make a difference, because I kept, amount of times I got down to the last 2, there was a Carla Lane series of alcoholics, and I always remember the director always felt that must have been like for women, when they had a certain gaze, male or female, parts of their body when they're being interviewed. I'd have people looking at the top of my head, thinking, can we have a 27-year-old who's going thin at the top? Not sure. So to answer your question was that I fairly quickly went into character parts. Theatre-wise, didn't make too much of a difference, but I was never that, beautiful Juve lead, which of course can end when you stop being beautiful and then you've got nothing left. So in many respects, being a character actor is quite a good investment, really.
Yeah, you had longevity, definitely.
Yeah.
What are you working on at the moment?
I'm directing a production of art, which with 3 guys over here. There was a big series over here called Bachelor's Walk, and it was a hugely popular series. Now we're talking about, I think it finished 15 years ago or something, but it was very popular. And the 3 boys from that are playing the characters in this. And it's what they do, because of the pandemic, what's been happening here is everything's been streamed. And streaming is a bit of what I call a hybrid between theatre and TV. And personally, I'm not crazy about it. I've seen very little that has thrilled me, but it's necessary. There was no other alternative. You couldn't perform in theatres. Beginning to happen in England now, but still in Ireland, very little is going on in any spaces in the theatre. So streaming is there, but it's also these shows eventually, when audience allowed back, will go out on commercial tours. So I've done 2, another new play I did earlier, both directing this as well. And I do that because I don't just want to take what's the next job, so as an actor. So it's quite handy to just be able to do that. And then I'm in something called Red Election, which is coming out fairly soon. I don't know whether I play a Scotsman. I think it's Channel 4, but it's called Red Election anyway, and I play a Scotsman. And
we shall keep an eye out for that then.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you very much for joining us.
Last question. I've got one last question.
Yeah.
While Mike's, have you met any real life gasmen who have had their lives affected by people shouting gas man at them while they're trying to work or anything like that? You heard?
There was somebody when I was there in England at the time who said that they it wasn't a gas man, but they said that the local gas man was shouted at by several of their neighbours who did shout out gas man, and. No, there's no question of that. I mean, I never interviewed any particular gasman, but I know that happened. So if that electricity guy shouted to me in Ireland nearly 30 years later, gasman, then you can be rest assured the gas board people are still being shouted at, I suspect.
You do. You
All
see
that free
pictures go
advertising.
around, don't you? There are pictures online of people just taking photos of the vans and just,
And I suppose they still, and I'm sure there's a whole generation of gas men that don't know what the hell people are shouting at.
Yeah.
Or maybe that went into it because they wanted to be a gas man.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, I hope I made lots of people want to become gas men and know they're going to be attacked and stabbed in the ghoulies and beat over the head by a frying pan for their pains. Dangerous job.
Yeah. Richie and Eddie are the last people you want to see when you open the door.
Exactly. Oh my God, no. I think I'll move on.
Mark,
thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much for joining us here today.
No, it's a pleasure talking to you, and you keep it going. Keep me informed about what you're up to. It'd be great.
Thank you very much.
We'd love to have you join us. Perhaps we might be having like a bottom convention one day. We hope.
I would happily do so, and I'll come over if you're doing it in England. I'll come over because I'm backwards and forwards. Anyway, I was in, as you know, that Ferryman show. I was in that for 6 months in the West End. No, 8 months in the West End, and I then did a show at Hampstead. So I'm backwards and forwards. Anyway.
Well, yeah, when we do, we'll definitely make sure it works out for your diary.
With
Thank
pleasure.
you so much for your time, Mark.
Thank you very much indeed.
All the
nice
best.
to meet you all.
Lovely to meet you. Take care.
Bye-bye.